and we're going to talk about Jim Lee. So, Jim Lee recently made some comments that caused quite a stir. Jim Lee, of course, the legendary comic book artist and now publisher for DC Comics, made some statements regarding manga and American Western comics. We'll call it American comics from here on out. And it kind of rankled some people a little bit. I mean, personally, I don't see anything. I don't see anything he said as being derogatory towards American comics. It's just a reality of the comic book industry right now. So, let's talk a little bit about what some of the things, some of the points he made. So, one of the points he made was manga having such a wide range of genre diversity, right? Just tons of different types of books, from horror to sci-fi to action to soccer and cooking, etc. And that, whereas American comics are, pretty much focused on superhero stories. And, if you think about it, basically what manga's doing is it's casting a wider net. And by doing that, it's bringing in, more readers. So whereas, DC is got a much more focused approach, and, you can't argue with the numbers, that are coming out when it comes to market share. And then the other thing he touched on was accessibility. So, and accessibility, kind of on two fronts, right? Just getting a book, right? So manga is available. Yeah, it's in your local comic shop, but it's also in bookstores. And you can get comics in bookstores, but they're generally just going to be graphic novels. And those graphic novels, can carry a pretty steep price tag compared to manga titles, which average around $10. Also, your manga, single, graphic novel type of book, it's a complete story arc. There's no need to be aware of any kind of continuity, anything that happened beforehand. You can just jump right in and read that story arc. Each one's got a great jump in point. Whereas that's not necessarily the case with American comics. You've got on a lot of these titles, you've got decades of continuity to catch up on or find out about, to figure out in a lot of aspects what's going on in the current storyline. So those were the two main, I think, the biggest points he made, and is definitely evidence as to how manga has been eating American comics lunch. It just offers more. There's more selection. Another thing he pointed out was in Japan, manga is culturally accepted across all ages. Whereas here in the states, comic books have kind of a stigma where they're thought of as just like children's entertainment. There's still that stigma that comic books are, childish. It's definitely improved over the last, 25 years, maybe 30, especially with, a large part and thanks to the film industry. When books like Road to Perdition, Juno, Scott Pilgrim versus the World, those things are being made into films. It's kind of changing the perception a bit of comics. So, but it still is, it's in America, it still carries that stigma of childish or child entertainment. And so those are big, and I think that's probably more the stigma is probably more for doing a job of keeping adults out who maybe have never collected comics before, more so than people who are already in it or have been in it. But so that's really kind of a general overview of the comments he made. You know, I I think, I mean, he's right on all points. You know, on all those points, they're totally valid. And, you know, as a custodian of the largest comic book brand in the world, you know, he's got to look at that stuff. You know, any good business is going to evaluate who's dominating and why. What are they offering that we're not? And then you look at what their successes are, and then you try to adapt that into what you're doing. And frankly, that's what I think DC and Marvel both need to do is because the audience is adapting. And but it's hard. It's hard for a company like DC or Marvel to just all of a sudden pivot to something completely different from what they've done. Plus, you know, the superhero stuff, that's their pillar, right? So that's their foundation. They would be fools to get rid of that stuff. But in my opinion, of course, this is just my opinion. I am no expert. I've never ran a major corporation like that. But I think they would do well to pare down some titles, especially Marvel, pare down some titles, and then look at what are maybe start with what the top two genres of manga books, what the top two genres are. And then say, okay, well, let's say it's, just for the sake of argument here, let's say it's horror and sci-fi are the top two genres of manga books. Well, then DC says, all right, we're going to cut back a few books, a few titles, but we're going to release two titles in sci-fi and two titles in horror, and no capes showing up or anything, no superpowers, nothing. Just these two genres, two books in these two genres, and come up with some kind of a hybrid manga format, and see what happens. But corporations hate risk. Corporations like predictability, and that's what things like when Diamond was in their heyday, that's what they offered was predictability, and that's what corporations love. Plus, corporations move so slow. Any kind of change, corporations are very slow to make. So it's going to be interesting for the next 10 years to see how things pan out, to see if Marvel or DC try to make any changes, or if they're just going to continue to, steam ahead and hope that they ride out this, you know, period of transition that these audiences are doing. I mean, in the end, only time's going to tell. So yeah, there's no. He never. Jim Lee never said anything about American comics are dead. That's what I had heard at first, that he had made a statement that American comics are dead, and I was like, what? A publisher for DC Comics is actually coming out and saying that. But no, he didn't say that at all. If anything, he was just praising manga and just being real. I mean, you're talking about a guy who's been in the business 30 plus years. Started out as just super high in demand comic book artist, publisher, and now this steward of this enormous IP ecosystem. So everybody breathe a little bit. It wasn't as crazy as people are making out. But that's pretty much just a quick overview of the things Jim Lee talked about, and his observations on what manga is doing right and where there's struggle for American comics. And I think the big takeaway, though, the biggest point is that manga is able to reach audiences that American comic books have struggled to. Anyways, so hey, thanks for joining me on the Jim Lee talk.